But when oil was first found, first used, that's what we're going to talk about whales next. Oil is used for lighting. And before you had electricity, you had little lamps. You should have a lamp. A lamp, like a lantern, has oil in it, and you burn oil so you can see instead of a candle. They also used it for lubricants, like for gears, and like that's what they used it for. But the only source of oil was whales. Okay, and I have a graph over a chart over here. Bowhead whale is 60 feet long and weighs 60 tons. That's big. It's as long as 3 Suburbans lined up, but about 10 times the amount of weight is how huge they are. And so that's where we got whale and oil. You could get 275 barrels of oil by getting one whale. They would go get the whale and take the oil out of his body and bring it into shore. They go ahead whaling ships. And the United States had 80% of the world's oil of the whaling fleets. Okay? So they went out and got oil from animals. They had to kill the animal to get the oil. 275 barrels of oil is what we needed. Now I have another graph right here talking about the U.S. whaling industry. Because America needed lights. You wanted to be a student, you had to be able to read. You needed the lamps. People needed oil. Okay, and the source for oil was whales. Okay, and I have a graph here that shows that in America, in 1712, there was one whaling ship. And a whaling ship would have men on board and go out and they'd find a whale, and they'd harpoon it, and then take the whale out of it.
They would squeeze the oil out.
Yes. Here, I don't know if I tell you this or not. There's 27 barrels of oil in his tongue alone. When you said squeeze it out, I know it's bad. But there's a good part to this story. Okay, in 1774, we had 360 whaling ships. By 1846, we had 700 ships in America. And most of the whaling fleet in the world was in America, 80%. And they were producing 350,000 barrels of whale oil in 1846. So that's a lot of ships going out and getting a lot of whales, right? But America needed the oil. That was where you got the oil from. But what happened was, in 1849, another geologist, Dr. Abraham Gesner, he figured out a way of getting kerosene lamps instead of whale oil lamps. In 1849, he figured out a way to get out of petroleum products that came out of the ground naturally, how to get kerosene out of it. Okay, he was an inventor, a geologist, so you could have kerosene lamps. But like Columbus and those explorers who went around the world, there were natural oil seeps. Oil comes out of the ground naturally in a lot of places around the world, and these sailors knew where those places were. They'd sail their ships there and go get the tar and pitch and put it on their boats. It made their boats so they wouldn't sink and protect them. So they knew where it was. So people knew about naturally occurring oil in the ground, but there wasn't very much of it. Okay, in 1849, Dr. Gesner figured out how to make kerosene out of this oil, and you use it for using stoves and for lamps. But the invention didn't mean much because there wasn't any oil. There wasn't much oil. You still needed these whales for the oil. Then what happened, in 1859, in Pennsylvania, Colonel Drake, he wasn't really a colonel, but that was what they called him, he drilled a well in Pennsylvania and it produced oil. It was the first time they drilled a well in the ground and got oil to flow out of the ground. Okay? And for the next 50 years, more than half of the world's oil production was coming from Pennsylvania. Okay, but it wasn't enough for the world. But you can see by this chart right here, by 1876, we're only 39 whale ships. We weren't getting our oil from the whales anymore. We were getting them from these wells in Pennsylvania. Okay, and by 1896, the sperm whale oil from a sperm whale, it would cost 40 cents a gallon. Or you could buy kerosene from Mr. Gessner's technique for 7 cents a gallon. So if you were a homeowner in 1896, and you needed to buy oil to heat your house, what kind of oil would you get? The whale oil or the kerosene?
Kerosene.
Why? It's a lot cheaper. That's right. It was a lot cheaper to make kerosene. And then, but there still wasn't enough oil in the world. They were made a few wells. They were making some wells in Pennsylvania. But what happened? What changed the world and changed Corpus Christi?